You guys will have to mute and unmute because there's a lot of chatter in the back.
The Bitcoin Group, the American original. For over the last 10 seconds, the sharpest Satoshis, the best Bitcoins, the hardest cryptocurrency talk. We'd like to welcome our panelists, Josh Tigala from the Standard.io.
I could take double of what you could take, anything.
Dan Eve, the Crypto Raptor.
Live from Fordingbridge.
And I'm Thomas Hunt from the World Crypto Network in the United Kingdom. Moving on to issue one. Issue one, Mad Money's Jim Cramer offers advice on cryptocurrency investing. Yes, the old dogs are here, and what amazing advice do they have for you? Buy Bitcoin and Ethereum. Yes, Jim Cramer of Mad Money, the man who pushes the button and tells you the truth about what to buy, picked Bitcoin and Ethereum. Josh, what do you think of Mad Money's advice? And has he solved investing for all?
Oh man, it scares me that he's saying anything. As soon as that guy says anything, you want to get out because it's like the shoeshine boys, you know, when they start talking about a stock, you get out. But well, let's see. You know, maybe it'll probably go lower. So anything that guy says, get out because yeah, you want to be ahead of that guy, basically.
Dan Eve, Jim Cramer is here. He knows everything. He's Mad Money.
Well, it's always a good time to dollar average in, but I think I'm in agreement with Josh that I think we've got a bit lower to go. We haven't quite tested the $21,000 the Sailor safety net, the MicroStrategy safety net. So I think that there's a bit of movement ahead. We're pretty much now like just over halfway to the next halvening, right? So I think there's a bit of a choppy road ahead. And also as Josh said about if the fact that as soon as you hear that like the taxi driver and the shoe shine is saying, hey, buy Bitcoin, then it's time to not be buying Bitcoin. But at the same time, don't sell Bitcoin either, because you'll always regret it at some point.
Josh Tigala, Michael Saylor was quoting Jesus this week, going to turn water into wine. Is he getting religious as we approach the $21,000 Saylor barrier?
Anyone that goes into Bitcoin hard starts becoming very religious about it. We've all been there. Praying at the altar of Satoshi. But yeah, Dan, did you just fractalize Bitcoin? We're at the half of the halving.
Oh. The half of the halvening.
The half of the halvening. Everyone celebrates that. Oh, it's like an unbirthday.
The good old half of the halvening.
It's your unbirthday. It's my unbirthday too.
Nice. Well, the thing is, it's hump day, if it's halfway, because that's when it starts to head back up.
Ah, yes, the very popular humpening festival, the humpening, yes. Exit question, Josh Tigala, competing against the magic it ball of travel, the predictor of predictors, prognosticator of prognosticator. Higher or lower, Josh Tigala, next week?
Well, I would say it's going to maybe do a little bit of a bounce, and then it'll continue in its bearish consolidation, just to put it in technical analysis terms for you there, folks.
Dan Eve, higher or lower?
I've seen the triangles and it's going a lower.
And now the magic ball. Will the price of Bitcoin go higher? We're going to need additional support here. It says, ask again. Ask again. The ball traveled all this way to tell you to check back in later. Maybe we'll check back in later, but for now, we're moving on to issue 2. Global Bitcoin adoption to hit 10% by 2030, according to a Blockware report. Bitcoin, like the internet and social media, benefits from network effects where more adoption spurs higher value and incentive for additional take-up, causing more adoption and higher value. Of course, we've heard this before when we used to talk about Trace Mayer and the 7 network effects of Bitcoin, which he published June 29th, 2015, over 7 years ago. Of course, Trace identified the 7 network effects of Bitcoin as speculation, merchant adoption, consumer adoption, security, developer mindshare, financialization, and adoption as a world reserve currency. We're well on our way. And also we celebrate James D'Angelo and his excellent series.
So multiply, but you've only got so many cells in your body, and it starts to go like this. Okay, or virus.
And you start to see the S curve here, as James said in Bitcoin 101, why Bitcoin's growth is normal, and the S curves that you could see November 12th, 2013, over on the World Bitcoin Network. James D'Angelo, listen to just a little bit.
Now, S-curves aren't the only way populations go, right? Famously, the dinosaurs had nice exponential. Maybe they even saturated for a while, and then they were gone. Okay? There's a number of things that can happen. You can start to go into this vertical area of your S-curve, right? And who knows, say humans land on and they kill all the rats, right? Or a disease kills all the rats, or a flood, or a drought. So there's a number of things that can happen to a growth of a population. But it's important to realize that this S-curve not only works in biology, but it also works in economics. And we're going to look at 2 companies that have exhibited this S-curve to a T. The first one, really making the news, right, is Twitter, okay?
Making the news in 2013.
And we're going to plot them on the same graph, even though their beginning times and their IPO times were different. But we're going to say, here's TO, T
That's
original.
a good bird that he's
Then we'll plot
drawn.
them up through their IPOs.
He's a professor. He's an excellent artist as well, you
This
see.
is important. This moment actually is important for any company, right? When you release your shares to the public. So this point.
But anyway, James's video is fantastic. I wish we could play it all, but he continues to show how Bitcoin, viruses, Facebook, Twitter, other things that go viral have an S curve like that. Are they correct? Dan Eve, will Bitcoin and global adoption hit 10% by 2030? An incredible number.
I think I don't know. I think it's going to be quicker than that. 10% seems like a low forecast by 2030. It's 2022 now, so there's 8 years already. We have smartphones that can have Bitcoin wallets on them. Albeit then they're that they don't have a full node on them. But you can have Bitcoin and use Bitcoin on a smartphone that you can get for like $20, and that's only going to get cheaper as time goes on, and more accessible for these countries with especially with things like Starlink coming online and like servicing the areas that don't currently have the internet. So soon they're going to be able to have a smartphone and internet in extremely sort of sparsely populated areas, and that's going to be accelerated by technology, and then they'll have the ability to get on board with Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies that they might try and use it if the sats become too expensive, because that's the thing, right, is that Bitcoin is good for servicing the unbanked, but like if transactions, if Bitcoin does reach the $1 million blah blah blah, and transactions are like $15, they'll have to use Lightning, so it'll have to be all Lightning and not main chain.
And then beyond that, we've got micro Satoshis. We've got it covered. We've got it going. Josh Shigala, are they right? Will Bitcoin adoption hit 10%?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I think if not Bitcoin itself, definitely the entire crypto space. Like, you just can't. You won't be able to get away from it. It's all going this way. It's just much more efficient. Rather than even just to look at the DeFi space. Why would you hold, especially in Europe? You got negative interest rates. Why would you hold your money in the banking system that's charging you for the privilege of having your liquidity? It's insane. So there's not only that, you can then start to borrow against your own assets without trusting any bank. There's so much you can do with your liquidity in this space that it's just it's going to go that way. And yeah, it's definitely going to be 10%, if not more.
It seems like everybody and their brother is getting into crypto, and they're all subscribing to WCN Clips. Check the link in the description. WCN Clips now with 109 subscribers, and the next one could be you. We've got clips from just last week. Roger Ver promoting Dogecoin, Central African Republic adopting Bitcoin as legal currency, Fidelity, El Salvador, and more. WCN Clips, the link in your description, or Google WCN Clips for clips of the show. Moving on to issue 3. As El Salvador's president tries to silence free press, journalist brothers expose his ties to street gangs. Yes, it seems that Nayib Bukele made a deal with one of the largest street gangs in El Salvador, a deal in which Bukele aides gave jailed leaders of the Mara Salvatrucha gang special treatment in exchange for their pledge to reduce violence on the street. At first, the deal was successful. However, when it broke down, the gangs murdered 62 people over a weekend, resulting in a crackdown where Bukele arrested everyone who looked like a gang member, including anyone with a tattoo. Bukele is also in danger of default. A year after they adopt Bitcoin as legal tender, they could default on their sovereign debt in 2023. It doesn't look good for Bukele and El Salvador, as a team of El Salvadorian brothers have risked their lives to expose this story about the street gangs, now featured in the Los Angeles Times. Thomas Hunt, your thoughts on El Salvador? Well, as we've discussed on this show many times, the Bitcoiners just went into El Salvador as if they were also naive of Bukele. Anyone could have searched the Wikipedia and read about how he took power through violence, how he brought men with guns onto the floor of Congress and took power, how he replaced Supreme Court justices with violence and threats of violence, and know that it wasn't going to end well. Not to say we can't say, hey, enjoy the Bitcoin, have as many backwards hat featuring conventions as you want. We support you, which we certainly do. Try it out as much as you want, but we didn't all have to go there. We didn't have to move there. We didn't have to build a city inside of a volcano to know that this wasn't going to end well. And it doesn't look good again for El Salvador. It's important to have a strong, democratic and reasonable government that you can work with, rather than having a dictator if you're going to have a Bitcoin paradise. But we are surprised and shocked of these new and horrible developments. Josh Segala, are you surprised and shocked that Nayib Bukele had deals with the gangs and that the dictator just can't seem to be trusted?
I mean, any gang, any government is a gang. It's just has a monopoly on this, on the use of force. That's the general thing. You have the monopoly on the use of force, and the thing is, if you're not that good, and the other gang decides to go even more forceful, then you have to compete. And so making a deal seems pretty ordinary. So that's coming at it from a market economic sort of point of view, that you have to fight fire with fire. That's how revolutions are always generally violent, and because you've got these two opposing teams trying to gain the power of monopoly of the use of force. And yeah, it's not surprising. I don't know really the ins and outs too much of it, but what I do know is that when it comes to the default of the place, the amount of Bitcoin that they're buying isn't extraordinary, even for such a small country. So I think there was way other reasons they were heading towards default, like many countries are anyway. And so, but what I do see is that there'd be a lot of countries now pointing at them saying, oh, see, Bitcoin made it default, when it's not. It's just not. It would have been heading there anyway. And I think Bitcoin, actually, if we hit start to hit a bull market soon, it could actually go the total opposite way. And we've seen this multiple times. And really, if we look at the $21,000 cap that Michael Saylor has on his long position as a margin call, it's sort of similar, right? And sort of similar. So we'll see what happens. I hope that they don't. I hope that the experiment works out. I don't really have a horse in that race in terms of Bukele himself. I don't like governments. I try to do as little as possible with them, and I think everyone else should. As a libertarian, anarcho-capitalist type, I like to do as little as possible with the state and try to fix complex social problems without violence.
Well, as we all know, Bitcoin didn't choose El Salvador. Bitcoin didn't speak for it, didn't speak against it. Bitcoin, once again, despite our efforts to contact it, was silent on this issue. Dan, Eve, will there be big investors for the volcano bond? What about the El Salvadorian experiment?
Well, I'm not sure about the volcano bond, but I think there's a lot of heat on El Salvador at the moment. They only own about 66 or something million at current prices. So according to Google, they own 2,301 Bitcoin, which saying just $29,000, is 66.7 million, which is obviously not enough to cause to blame, I think, for their default of the $800 million loan, right? Because there's obviously a huge difference between the $800 million deficit they have and the 66 million. So I think it would be just convenient to blame it on Bitcoin as the big kind of failed experiment. But ultimately, they don't have much chance. Everyone else has got these big deals with the IMF, and they have all these cushy sort of deals. El Salvador's a small country, so this was a bit of taking a chance for them. And why not? Why not give it a go? Why not be trying to get out of that slavery from the ridiculous system that monetary system that we currently have, and being governed by a bunch of other governments, and have sovereignty in using Bitcoin? It would just make perfectly logical sense. So yeah, we'll see. The fact is, though, that the IMF and the international, the Bank of International Settlements, they're all salivating right now. They're waiting for the Sailor, what do you call it? The Sailor $21,000 deadline. They're waiting for El Salvador to go, and then they can just use that for more regulation and to cut, try and throttle Bitcoin as much as possible.
They're waiting for the opposite of Sailor Moon. That's what they're waiting for, the opposite.
It could be quite a reversal, yes. Exit question. Will we see the collapse? Will Bukele give up on Bitcoin? Will Saylor give up on Bitcoin? Give me a quick yes, no, Josh Shigala.
No way.
They both stick it out to the end. Dan, Eve, do they both stick it out?
Yeah, I'm going with they'll stick it out. They'll be pumping Bitcoin forever.
Strong men also cry. Strong men also cry. Moving on to issue 4. Human rights advocates tell Congress that Bitcoin is essential in countries with collapsing currencies. Yes, in response to a ridiculous letter that was written by prominent technologists complaining about crypto for being too risky and unproven, human rights advocates from around the world have sent a rebuttal to lawmakers, saying that in countries where local currencies are collapsing, broken, or cut off from the outside world, Bitcoin and stablecoins allow the trading in and out of crypto without going through a bank, allowing tens of millions of people access to currency and banking despite living under authoritarian regimes or unstable economies. Dan, Eve, what do you think about the incredible success of Bitcoin and the human rights advocates' version of cryptocurrencies?
Well, I think the unbanked, the best way they can get in, they don't need to do KYC, is get an app on their phone and start being able to pay people. It's the easiest thing to do. You don't have to fill in any forms. You just need to kind of make sure you store your seed and then start transacting with people. It's like the quickest way to be in control of money and to be able to pay people around the world. So there's a lot of appeal for it. Even if it's not Bitcoin, the article mentioned stable coins as well. The fact that it's just as easy for someone to get like a MetaMask wallet on their phone and then just start transacting stable coins with other people, especially on chains like, cheaper chains, because Ethereum is way more expensive than Bitcoin to send transactions. So, they can send stable coins on like Matic and BSC and these other Optimism, all these other other networks and layer twos on Ethereum. So as well as obviously Lightning. So there's a lot of variety for people to actually choose from, and the fact that they're trying to lobby Congress from an activist perspective, I think is really positive for Bitcoin, because activism's or slacktivism, the old pressing a vote, I vote, I click my vote here or whatever online, and you can be a petition hero and stuff like that. But activism is really popular right now, right? And if they're going along the lines of they're battling the environmentalist side and saying, yeah, but look what it does for countries that are absolutely stuffed by their currencies. It gives them access to a financial system without a tyrannical banking system. So I think it's a good thing that they're lobbying Congress from this angle, because it's a heartstring puller, and no one wants to let these countries lose out, and their people lose out because they don't have access to financial systems.
I know all about the stable coins. It's where they keep the horses. Josh Shagala, Bitcoin, is it finally banking the unbanked?
Yeah, I mean, this was the dream when we all got into it. When James DeFranco was doing the videos back in 2013, and even earlier, like this is what we were all talking about: banking the unbanked, getting away from the banks and unbanking the banked. That was also the call. So it is really happening. So I see a lot of economies that basically, just like the mobile phone, places like Nigeria that just jumped the landline altogether and went straight to mobile. They really are embracing this too. It's one of the largest use cases of Bitcoin is over there. So there's really it's actually an underserved market, but it's also underappreciated how many people are using crypto right now. And this is why we at the Standard are getting in the stablecoin game as well, is to allow people not only get people the use cases of what Bitcoin is, because once you have stablecoin, then you can buy the speculative assets that you need, like Bitcoin at the moment. It's an extraordinarily huge market. It's a very, very important market, and it's the dream that we all wanted. It's the banking the unbanked. So I really applaud the group that went after that and actually set the story straight.
Well, whatever you do, don't gamble all your stable coins on the ponies. I had a parlay with the ponies and it went nowhere. So we're moving on to issue 5. Issue 5, everyone's favorite issue. It's back again. Grayscale, Bitwise are confident that a spot Bitcoin ETF will be approved soon. We talk about ETFs all the time. People have money in their retirement accounts. It's pre-tax money. They want to invest it in Bitcoin. They don't want to pay the extra fee for Barry Silbert's company. Right now, they can buy futures ETFs, but once again, they're confident it'll be approved soon. Dan, Eve, will we see a Bitcoin ETF in America so people can finally invest their retirement money in Bitcoin?
Well, eventually, but things like the recent Luna crumble, like even though that's nothing to do with Bitcoin, it's still being, it's still tarring Bitcoin with that brush. That's where a lot of the opposition is coming from. Regulation is like, oh, these cryptocurrencies are dangerous. Look what happened to Luna. Well, Luna isn't Bitcoin. It's a completely different kettle of fish. But people that aren't technologically educated on Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies and the difference between them all, and the fact that Bitcoin is the hardest of hard money for a number of reasons compared to these other cryptocurrencies. Unfortunately, Bitcoin still gets the bad rap. So fair enough. It sounds like it's coming from a good place, that they need to protect people, but we're already seeing the fact that even traditional banks are opening up their doors to Bitcoin clients, but only for high net worth individuals. So really, what does that actually tell you? Is that what they're doing is that they're literally holding a gate in front of the people that could benefit from it most, and only allowing high net worth individuals to interact with Bitcoin via their services and under the guise of protection. But they just know that they're letting their friends who are also high net worth people get in early. So I think a spot ETF is on, it's coming, but whether it comes quite soon, I think that a lot of the FUD is still lingering around, and I think some of the environmental stuff needs to be cleared up before in terms of, we already know the situation, but to be made more evident to the people that question it. So it's one of those things that just disappears off the Bitcoin FUD list.
I could definitely see them bringing in some Bitcoin programmers to Congress and then saying them, what about Luna? Did you work on Luna? Do you know the Luna guys? Do you hang out? They're very clearly intertwined, even though we all know they're completely different projects. Josh Shigala, will we see a spot ETF? Give the people what they want. I want my ETF.
We can't possibly offer that. It's far too risky, Give the people a $1 in 100 million, $1 in 100 million chance at the lottery. That's fine. Allow them to gamble on the horses. That's fine. Allow them to gamble on the slot machines. That's fine. Something like Bitcoin that has made everyone wealthy if they've held it for more than 4 years, not fine.
Very well said. Agreed. Much agreed. Moving on to issue 6. Jack Dorsey and Jay-Z launch free Bitcoin Academy to lift New York City public housing residents. The men are funding a Bitcoin-focused education program for the residents at the rapper's childhood home. It sounds like pretty much the greatest story ever. I'm 100% in support of this. I'm glad to see people with large amounts of money contributing to Bitcoin education, and especially Bitcoin education targeted at specific groups, especially lower income groups that could really use the potential help of Bitcoin, both in avoiding fees, having a bank account that won't be closed, a bank account that can be opened without an address or a permanent location if you have to move around a lot. There's a lot of benefits that I think could be offered to people in this situation from Bitcoin that they wouldn't get otherwise. So shout out to Jack Dorsey and Jay-Z. Hopefully it turns out great and it becomes good work. Josh Shigala, your thoughts on Bitcoin education project?
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely fantastic. This is the stuff we're talking about, and we had Jason King back in the day, back in 2013. He was helping homeless people with Bitcoin, and homeless people were getting Bitcoin, and I hope that they didn't just shove all the profits up their arm, but that's the unfortunate side of being homeless. A lot of them have substance abuse issues, but yeah, I hope that it maybe can get people out of a pickle when they learn about Bitcoin, because it teaches you all sorts of things. It teaches you how to save, how to really push any sort of joy or something that you want in the now, and sort of be able to push it for a little bit down the road. And that skill, just that skill itself, is a really important one. It's a life skill that will get people very, very far. And it's a skill that has been lost over time, because as you're saving in fiat, there's this sort of, I wouldn't say, everyone consciously knows it, but unconsciously you kind of want to get rid of fiat as much as possible, because it's just losing value. And so people just generally don't save. But with Bitcoin, once you start with Bitcoin, you generally you don't want to spend. You're like, ooh, do I want this thing that bad that I'm going to get, or should I just hold it for another week? So let's see.
Dan, Eve, your thoughts on free Bitcoin education?
I think this is one of those headlines that, like, if you'd have heard it 10 years ago, or even like 3-4 years ago, whenever like you first came into Bitcoin, if it was more than like 3-4 years ago, but it's one of those headlines that you wouldn't have thought like, oh, Jack Dorsey and Jay-Z, they're teaming up to fund Bitcoin development, like and to do like this cool thing in the community with Bitcoin. It's like one of those almost fairy tale kind of stories.
You'd be glad they'd even heard of Bitcoin.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
when you met them on the street, and you're like, "Hey, Jack, you heard of Bitcoin?" You're like, "Yeah, Bitcoin's cool." And you'd be like, "Man, that's cool. He's heard of it." Jay-Z and Jack know about Bitcoin.
I think it's awesome. Like, and certainly when I first heard and read about Bitcoin, it was there wasn't really it was 2013. There was no kind of shows on it, no covering it, no Jim Cramer commenting on it. There was it was crazy if someone actually talked about Bitcoin in the media. Now you've got, huge household name like Jay-Z, who's like, really behind Bitcoin, and not just behind Bitcoin from almost in an ironic way, like his raps about being rich and having a yacht and stuff, and then big pimping and whatever, and then but now he's doing something really humble, which is like giving back to community and funding Bitcoin open source development. I think it's just really kind of poetic the way it's panned out, and how big really Bitcoin is becoming, not just from a like, oh, I made loads of money perspective, but from a this could really change the world perspective.
It is banking the unbanked at home and abroad. We're running out of time. Josh Segala, do you have a story of the week or a prediction? Go ahead.
I predict that life will get better, and that the world isn't turning to shit. It's only getting better. Turn off the television, throw it out the window, or shoot it with a gun. Just get rid of it.
Always look on the bright side of life. All right, Dan, Eve, a prediction or a story of the week? Go ahead.
I predict that once the show's over, we're probably gonna have a drink and go and just chill in a hot tub in a nice place in the country.
Yeah,
and just chill out and waffle about Bitcoin all night.
We can't decide whether we should be knighted or whether we should be lords now that we control land in the country.
Mm-hmm.
Sir Dan, Lord Tom, Sir Tom, Lord Dan. Maybe both. It's very hard to choose out here in the UK, but it's great to be with you guys. Check out the Mad Bitcoin's Twitter feed for lots of photos of museums and the British Museum and the Louvre and all that stuff. Give us a thumbs up down below. We didn't remind you like a dozen times so you're like, oh, I forgot. You can still put it in at the end, and subscribe if you haven't already. You just push subscribe, and we're supposed to go back wide for the big 3 shot. You can see all of us together, Josh.
Oh yeah.
All right. Ready? One more thing, Josh, for the end. Until next time. Bye.